Okay, this next one you have to FOIL out. So we have a binomial that has some factors or some square roots inside. This one's actually not an I, it's going to be a 1, so let me erase that. Just okay, what you want to do here is pretend that these are just regular binomials that you learned to FOIL in Algebra 1. So FOIL means first, outer, inner, last. So what I want to go ahead and do is multiply the first term. So -1 times -3. That's going to give me a -3. Okay, outers are going to be the -1 times radical 2. Okay, well I can't really combine the 2 and the -1, but I can go ahead and multiply the -1 times the 1 that's outside of radical 2. So that's minus of radical 2. Okay, inners, a different color here, are -4 radical 2 and a +3. Remember, you can't multiply the 3 times the radical, but you can multiply the numbers out front. That's okay, we can do that. So -4 times 3 is going to give me a -12 radical 2. And then lastly, we have the last terms. So -4 radical 2 times radical 2. Okay, here this one's a little bit different because we're multiplying two radicals. So we need to go ahead and multiply the -4 times the 1 that's in front here, and that's a -4. And because we're multiplying radicals, we can actually multiply the numbers that are underneath. Well, over here I'm just going to do it so you can see. What is radical 2 times radical 2? Okay, when you learn to multiply radicals, they're the same house, so we can multiply the numbers that are underneath, and that's going to give you a radical 4. Okay, well, what's the square root of 4? Okay, that's going to be 2. So this becomes 4 radical 4, and we'll go ahead and simplify it in the next step. Okay, so we have -3. We're adding and subtracting radicals here, so I have a minus a 1 minus, or a -1 radical 2 minus 12 radical 2. So I want to go ahead and simplify this. So -1 minus 12. I can subtract these numbers because they have the same house and the same number underneath. So that's going to give me a -13 radical 2. Okay, and then I have a minus of 4 times, over here we said that the radical 4, the square root of 4, was simply 2. So this crosses out right here to be 2. So -4 times 2 leaves me with -8. After that, just one more step. We still have two numbers here that we can multiply or subtract together. We have -3 minus 8, which is going to leave me with a -11 minus 13 radical 2. We can't do anything further than this because -11 doesn't have a radical attached to it, so that's all that we're going to do. But you have taken the two binomials, FOILed them together, and then they've left you with this simplified version. Okay, we have one more, and it's, or actually two more on here. Radical 3 divided by radical 48. So this is one where you're dividing, and I don't know if you've learned to rationalize the denominator, but that's essentially what you're going to do here. Also, something else that we can do is if we notice that 3 is maybe divisible by 48, we can combine the radicals and divide our numbers. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this one because I see that 48 and 3 divided by 48 is going to be 1/16. So this changes into radical of 3 divided by 48. So this is a property of radicals and division that you can separate them and you can put them back together. We can separate it into two radicals, or we could put the numbers dividing underneath one radical. So this is equal to, when you simplify 3/48, it's going to be 1/16. Okay, well that's a little simpler because I know that 16 is a perfect square, so that's going to help me out. Okay, so they were separate. I combined them. Now I'm going to pull them back apart. So now I have the square root of 1 divided by the square root of 16. Okay, these are both perfect squares, and that helps me out because then I don't have to end up rationalizing. I can simply just use my division properties. Square root of 1 is 1 divided by the square root of 16, which is 4. Okay, we've simplified our answer completely, and it's going to be 1/4. And the last problem that we're going to do today is 3 of radical 20 divided by radical 5. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to rationalize this denominator because I know that you're going to have to know how to do that. Okay, so when we're rationalizing, what we have to do is multiply by the rational in the denominator. The big no-no in math, we cannot ever leave a radical in the denominator, so you always have to rationalize in order to get rid of it. So what we're going to do is multiply by a form of 1. Okay, we can always multiply anything in math by a form of 1 because anything over itself is simply 1. It just happens to be a pretty convenient form for us to get rid of the radical in the denominator. When I multiply by radical 5 over radical 5, I can't multiply the 3 by the 5 because the 3 is not under the radical. However, I can multiply 20 times 5. Okay, so that's going to leave us up top with 3 radical of 20 times 5, which is 100, divided by, okay, well in that last example, or a couple examples ago, I said, what is radical 5 times radical 5? Or we were using 2's, I think. Well, this ends up being radical of 25, which we know to be the square root of 25, which is simply 5. Okay, so essentially when you're multiplying by a radical, like such as radical 5 by itself, essentially what you can do is simply drop the radical and just write the number that was underneath. But this right here is what's going on underneath all that. Okay, radical times itself, you're essentially squaring it, and so we take the square root of 25, which is simply 5. After this, we notice that square root of 100 is still, we can still simplify it because we know 100 to be a perfect square. So this is equal to 3. Okay, square root of 100 is equal to 10, and I'm still multiplying, so please make sure you're multiplying and not adding, divided by 5. Okay, simply multiply it out, so we have 30 on top, divided by 5. And 30 divided by 5 is simply 6. So 6 is your final answer here, and we did this by rationalizing the denominator. So we multiplied by radical 5. Okay, that's it for today. I hope this helped you a little bit, and let me know via email. I will post these to my website, and I hope it's helped.